Hi everyone, Comic Book Reviewer here, this time reviewing on Rocky 5. Now, as you know, Rocky 5 is meant to be a 1990 sports drama film, which of course was meant to have Sylvester Stallone returning into the iconic role of Rocky Balboa, but also having director John G. Avildsen returning after the first Rocky film. And the best way I can see where Rocky 5 was going for is pointing out the dangers of living back in the past, trying to foolishly help people, and seeing that the good in them is a reflection of yourself. And the whole premise of the film is meant to show after his victory with Ivan Drago in Moscow, we see how Rocky Balboa has to deal with not only physical trauma from the fight, but also brain damage. And we see how Rocky's life goes from this, seems like it's going back to normal, only for it to come crashing down, where all the money has gone basically into real estate by sort of embezzlements from obviously one of Rocky's sort of accountants, and we kind of see how Rocky, Adrian, as well as Paulie and their son Robert now have to kind of go back to their old neighborhood and now have to live their sort of next chapter in their lives, as now having to kind of no longer live the high life. And you can tell deep down Rocky does still want to box, he still wants to kind of go back to when things used to be. And I think what the film gets right at is showing how Rocky lets nostalgia, his past, and how it made him into kind of almost being a bit like Mickey. And you kind of got this sense that Mickey was living back in the past, but it was only Rocky that helped him realize how important people were. Rocky still wants to see the good in people and still wants to help out, but it kind of gives you this sense of a bit of misjudgment. And we even see how Rocky wants to help this sort of misguided kid known as Tommy Gunn be an actual fighter. And you can definitely tell Rocky sees a lot of himself in him, but fails to learn one hard lesson, that the good he sees in Tommy is just a reflection of himself. And the saddest part is, you can tell characters like Adrian, Paulie, as well as Robert see this, but Rocky's too blinded to actually see that Tommy's nothing like him, and there were red flags right away. I think what the film does a good job at is reminding you that you can't really live in the past and expect things to go back to the way they were, and a lot of the time trying to emulate back to the past and hoping to sort of live back to those glory days is never a healthy thing. And I think what the film does get right is having its own version of, obviously, Don King, known as George Washington Duke. And I do think Richard Grant is the right choice for George Washington Duke. He's meant to sound over obnoxious. He's arrogant. He expects himself to be on high on a pedestal. He sees Rocky as his next meal ticket for more money, and shows no concern or care for anyone. I think they definitely get George Washington Duke right here, because not only is he meant to be a foil to, obviously, Apollo's cockiness, but also a warning about people like George Washington Duke who only care about profit and more about themselves. And I think, to me, Tommy Gunn definitely works as a character, because when he has his own training montage, Go For It, as well as other songs during his whole train thing, it's meant to symbolize the difference between Rocky and Tommy. Rocky's one, It's All High Now, is more about Rocky going the distance and being something better. Tommy's song Go For It is meant to symbolize Tommy seeing anything as an opportunity to gain power and control. And you can definitely tell there were red flags right away, that Tommy wasn't the right student for Rocky, or the right student for anyone, as he doesn't see any guilt in his actions, and even before his descent into greed, and during his whole sparring match, when he says, "I'm sorry, but what do you think?" also symbolises the failures of obviously not seeing things as red flags a lot sooner than later. I think my best thoughts about Rocky 5 is that it actually does a good job reminding us that the past is in the past, and trying to live back in the glory days is never a healthy thing. And I think it does a good job showing us how much Rocky really wants to go back to those golden years, but the past is what made him into that person. I think my best thoughts about Rocky 5, it tries to be a bit more engaging, it's slightly more better, and I think it doesn't really deserve all of the hate and negative reviews it got. It was just more trying to be slightly realistic to the fans, to remind them that not everything works out like a Disney movie, and sometimes, obviously, going back to where you were, having to kind of learn and accept things that made you into that person, is a part of growing up. So I think it definitely deserves thumbs in the middle. Kind of alright, kind of okay, but just there to give a bit of a conclusion to the full Rocky films, feeling more like this one ends where it needs to be. Rocky having to move on. We see the characters having to accept that next chapter in their much older adult lives. So, Comic Reviewer here, signing out.